this is what I've learned. You can help two ways. You can solely be behind the scenes where you're not listed on a lawsuit. So an attorney can say, hey, here's some medical records. This is what happened to this patient. And you can basically just talk to the attorney, similar to how you're educating an SRNA. This is what happened in this case. This is what should have happened in this case. This is what we do. And you can kind of write a report based off of solely your thoughts that are never going to be shared with anyone else. The other side of it is actually being an expert witness, where you are critiquing or standing up to what is done in normal practice.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to CRNA's Corp Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Fennell, and today we have a very special guest, Kristen Hall. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So, today, you guys, we're going to discuss, can a CRNA become an expert witness? And if so, how do they get started in that career path, and maybe why this may be of interest of you? So I'm so fortunate to have met Kristen actually on LinkedIn. So I was like, oh, I've known of expert witness, and I know CRNAs can do this type of work, but I've never actually had the pleasure of speaking with someone to kind of hear more about what it is really like. And so about a week ago now, we met and we discussed this. I'm like, this would be a really interesting topic. And it just so happened that when I went to a recent faculty meeting and met one of our CRNA's Prep Academy students, Brittany, I'm giving you a shout out here. She actually asked me about this career path. And I'm like, you know what? I think I have an idea of who we can talk to kind of learn more about it, because I don't know enough really to speak to it. So this was really just meant to be that you came in my world. And I'm like, this is amazing. So welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you. Let's share with everyone a little bit about your CRNA background and kind of how you got into being an expert witness.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been a nurse for 15 years. I knew from the time I was 10 years old that I wanted to be a CRNA. I had surgery. I had a little soccer accident, had surgery on my ankle, and I absolutely love my CRNA. So when I was in high school, I knew I was going to a 4-year, program where I was going to get my bachelor's. I was going to work a couple of years and go straight into CRNA school, which is essentially what I did. So I have now been practicing for about 15 years. And my CRNA career kind of got to the point where I had reached the top, right? I was doing all the cases that I loved. I was charge nurse sometimes, I was teaching students, and I kind of got to the point where, like, okay, well, what's next? I worked my entire career to kind of get to this point, and I had a couple of children, and it was kind of like, okay, I was missing all the important stuff that was going on in their life. I wasn't, getting out on time, or I was always busy. So I was kind of just doing like a deep dive, like what's next? I had a bad experience when my son was born, and that kind of put me in contact with a risk manager. And it was interesting because my whole story, I just wanted to share my story about, this is how I felt when I was in the hospital, or these were the things that happened that really shouldn't have happened. And she really didn't listen to much of what I was saying. And I felt so frustrated. And I was like, I wonder who really is reviewing this stuff. Is she reviewing the record? And so that kind of sent me onto my journey of, wow, this is going to be a thing where I can do what I love, which is anesthesia, but I also can do a new career path where I can help people have a voice when they need it. And so that kind of like merged both worlds. And I didn't really know what that looked like at first. I started doing some online courses. I started watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I was like, oh, expert witness. But I didn't realize all the different levels of what you could be doing. And so I started my own business, and I kind of just started reaching out to attorneys. What does this look like? What are the needs here? Are there a lot of anesthesia errors? And I did a ton of marketing. I did a ton of educating. And this is what I've learned. You can help two ways. You can solely be behind the scenes where you're not listed on a lawsuit. So an attorney can say, hey, here's some medical records. This is what happened to this patient. And you can basically just talk to the attorney, similar to how you're educating an SRNA. this is what happened in this case. This is what should have happened in this case. This is what we do. And you can kind of write a report based off of solely your thoughts that are never going to be shared with anyone else. The other side of it is actually being an expert witness, where you are critiquing or standing up to what is done in normal practice, right? So, an esophageal intubation. Patient had an esophageal intubation and it wasn't identified on induction. The case started and the patient suffered an anoxic brain injury. So then you would say, okay, well, what we typically do is we listen for breath sounds, we monitor end tidal CO2, and it's okay if an esophageal intubation happens, but we have to correct it, right? Before it's too late. And so you kind of build your story of what you're going to talk about. You make an official report, you submit it to, depending on, there's two sides you can work on, plaintiff, defense, and you pretty much submit a professional report talking about the standards of care. They use that word in the legal world, standards of care. And it actually is just everything we do in normal practice, pre-anesthetic eval, documenting our airway assessment, documenting what we saw when we intubated. But that sounds like such a scary word. It's just what we do in everyday practice. And so then once you have submitted your report, the lawyers do all the legal stuff, right? So this is a way to bridge the gap between law and medicine. So you are then called by the opposing counsel and you are explaining your report. Once you explain your report, typically 90% of the time things are settled outside of trial. But if the case were to progress to a trial, then you would then go before a jury and explain your report as well.
Interesting. So one of the questions that popped in my brain is, do you get to pick whether you're defense or plaintiff?
So the attorneys are separate. So there's defense attorneys and plaintiff attorneys. The way we look at it is the plaintiff is kind of the person who has the complaint. So the family member of the patient who died from an anoxic brain injury because of an esophageal intubation. The defense is, those are the lawyers who are defending, the hospital or the system or whoever is kind of against who the plaintiff is suing. So depending on who you are marketing to, you can definitely choose what side you want to work on. Do you feel very passionately about defending the people who maybe something terrible has happened to them? Or do you feel very passionately about defending, the anesthesia entity and the hospital and the system on the other side? So you can decide.
Okay. Interesting.
And you can do both.
Very cool. Well, so I love your background, how you got into this and how you equally have had kind of some exposure in your own personal life with this need to kind of bring more of an expert into the picture to really create more understanding and clarity around when someone has an event. I'd like to speak to someone who understands what went wrong in a very, obviously in an expert way, right? Who has lived it and knows what's right, what's wrong. And speaking with someone who's had 3 children, it is, a lot. And I don't think everyone has that understanding. So when things go wrong, they don't necessarily even know that they've gone wrong. And I think there's something that obviously we're very fortunate that we have that background so we can pick up on it quickly. But I love the fact that you've used that experience and your expertise to kind of bring forth that passion to do this work. And so let's talk more about what has this done now? You said you went into it because you had young kids and you wanted more flexibility. And yes, you guys in the OR, at least at some facilities, I've experienced the opposite where like I've had a hospital job where it was really hard to get out on time. That was probably my, primary experience. And then I've also equally experienced the opposite where I've worked at a place where it's very rare to get stuck. Those are not common. That is why I love my job where I currently work, as one of the reasons why I love it, not all of it, but one of the reasons. And it's just not common to find. So when you have kids, it's hard because you have swim lessons or whatever, you need to get out of work on time. You have a hair appointment, whatever. It's your life. It's your life. You're like, I'm supposed to end at 3:30, not 4:30, not 5:30. That can be really frustrating as you embark on your CRNA career path. But this is giving you more flexibility. So I'd love for you to speak to what it has done as far as your work-life balance.
Sure. That was a huge thing for me. There were little things, muffins with mom. Muffins with
Mhm.
mom at daycare always happens at 9:30 in the morning, right?
Mhm.
And so I never even got to take the kids to daycare because I was
Mhm.
always in the OR at 6 a.m. So now it's freed up time where I can pick and choose. I worked really hard to get my degree. I love being in the operating room. And so I can choose, if I want to work 1 day a week, 4 days a week. If I have a lot of cases that I'm working on, then maybe that week I'm home. And so it just gives me the flexibility. So I've been able to go PRN, and it's totally just changed um, pretty much everything in our lives, where I can be the mom I want to be, the CRNA I want to be, the coworker I want to be, the wife, and everything has just given me that really nice balance that I think that we all work really hard to get there. And sometimes we get stuck and we don't know how to get there.
Right, 100%. So is this 1099 then, or how does that work as far
Mhm.
as it's 1099? Okay.
Yeah.
And PRN technically can be, was that W-2? Are you W-2 for your PRN position?
Yeah. So I mean, just hourly, and you're clocking in, clocking out,
Mhm.
and you're still part of the institution.
Right, right. Okay, that's how mine works too. It's funny. I was talking to the student, Brittany. I was like, yeah, PRN is really the way to go for CRNA because it really. And now you don't obviously get the medical benefits and some of the other perks of being a full time employee. But
Right.
if you can have either a spouse or a way to get the medical benefits or a retirement benefit for the work life balance, especially for young kids, oh my gosh, it's so nice to not have to be held to a certain amount of hours and also equally get to kind of pick what you want and what you don't want as far as your shifts. And
Exactly.
just to enlighten you guys too, I don't know what your experience is like with W-2 and working full time as a CRNA. This can really vary from hospital to hospital. I've had a position where a full-time FTE was 46 hours a week. That was insanity. I'm like, no thanks. Like, that's not okay.
Right.
That was a lot. And then I've had a facility who literally gave a lot of flexibility as far as I tried 13-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts, 12, and I've tried 16s and 24s. I've literally tried them all because I'm like, what's going to work for our lives now that we have a child?
Right.
And that's not always common, but it can be. And it's like you're always in this search with what's going to work. And yeah, you can find a work-life balance as a full-time CRNA, but I will say I think kids can really change that outlook for you quite a bit.
They do. They
Yeah.
do. I think that 46 hours, that 55 hours was really easy to do until you have people waiting for you at home expecting things from you. And when
Hmm.
you come home, an hour or two late and you're exhausted and you're emotionally depleted, it's really hard to be there for other people too. And not to mention your patients. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like everyone gets a better version of you when you can kind of step back just a little bit. We've
Hmm.
had a lot of people just in the area, that typical like 40, 46 hours.
Hmm.
People are now requesting 30. So it's
Yeah.
almost like the 30 hours is the new 40. And I mean, I don't know.
It
I kind of
is.
like that because I feel like, well, good. If that's an extra day where somebody can take care of
Mhm.
themselves and go on a run or go to the gym, it's only going to make them, and not even nurses, doctors, everyone, it's only
Mhm.
going to make them a better practitioner in the hospital.
Another daily dose of inspiration along your CRNA journey. It's finally my turn. I heard about CSBA back when it was still called ICU Dreaming About Anesthesia, back in 2019, 2020. Life got in the way and I didn't end up applying. Years down the road, I wasn't sure if I was going to apply anymore or if CRNA was still the route I wanted to take. I decided I would apply finally this year just to see what happened and jumped back into CSBA. I got into two dream schools here in California. I applied to three schools total, two acceptances, and will not be taking the third interview. My stats are average 3.3 GPA, 301 GRE, CCRN, leadership positions at my hospital, local Sigma Theta Tau. Retook a class and did a lot of interview prep through CSBA, which is through Nurses Teach Nurses, and with CRNA friends. It is doable. Believe in your dreams, invest in yourself. Thank you, Jenny, Dr. Wilson, and team. I could not have done it without you. And thank you to this community for your supportive nature and advice. I am grateful forever. Thank you so much for sharing the story. Congratulations, you know who you are. And I'm so proud that, again, you took the chance on yourself to just apply and see what happened. And I really think this kind of strikes me as someone who maybe is unsure, right? So maybe the question of CRNAs for them because they feel so unsure about whether they'd be successful or not. And I think this is a very common experience that people don't know if it's for them because they're not certain if maybe they're cut out for it. Maybe they think they're not smart enough or they don't have the best experience or the best leadership or whatever it is. But I can't say this enough that if you don't at least give yourself a chance, you're never going to be able to address potential shortcomings. And it's one of those, and I don't even call them shortcomings, but like, for example, if you never tried to make a basketball team when you were younger, would you have ever made a basketball team? No, you wouldn't. You would never have, because maybe you would try to make the basketball teams and you'd realize, oh, I'm not very good at slam dunking, or I'm not very good at dribbling, or I don't know, whatever. So quote unquote shortcomings or areas for improvement would be, you would never know what it is you need to focus on to make the basketball team. It's similar, you guys. You would never know what it is you need to improve upon to make it into CRNA school if you don't at least start the process of trying. So that's what I hope to leave you with, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and back to the show. 100%. I love that because, and I think this is a big area of our healthcare system's missing, is the fact that the reason why nurses are leaving bedside, this is speaking for like really all nurses, really CRNAs are not immune to what's going on in our healthcare system, but people are so after, I think one thing the pandemic did do is it highlighted the fact that time is short and your time on earth is short. Your family is only young once, and you also need to take care of yourself. You got to fill your cup first before you pour into others. And sometimes that requires time. And so would you rather lose someone altogether or give them a more flexible position? So that's what I think we're kind of seeing the necessary need to hospitals to make, like, okay, instead of losing this CRNA altogether, let's give them a flexible shift. And let's see how we can make a 32-hour work week where that's a full-time FTE where, you know, you have the benefits you want, but you can only give 32 hours a week. We are seeing that more often. It's definitely becoming more because they have to. It's either that or you lose them completely. But you know, I think CRNA, the unique part about being a CRNA is you have such a good income behind being a PRN, and you typically do get a nice hourly rate boost, that if you're smart with your finances and have a good CPA that you work with, you can make that a really, very, very lucrative lifestyle. And this was a part of my career that I was so afraid about because it seemed so scary and unsure, that even though I knew CRNAs who were really making a very good living doing 1099 and doing locum contracts, like local locum contracts. I mean, they weren't traveling to California from Ohio. They were just working the system locally and making a lot of money. But I was like, oh, what does it look like on my taxes? Like, I like my health benefits. Like, how do I navigate that? What I can promise you is that it'll be okay. Like, don't be afraid to take that leap if you think that's the kind of flexibility you need in your life. It's better to take that leap and learn that system than it is to kind of go on being unhappy, being stuck to a 46-hour work week as a CRNA. So,
right. I mean, I feel like that can even go to nurses, to ICU nurses. I remember, so the first year I applied to a school out in California. I kind of put all my eggs in one basket, right? I was like, I'm done with the ICU. I'm ready to go to CRNA school. And I didn't get in, and I was devastated. And that last year of work in the ICU was my favorite year. I was charge nurse. We started doing a lot of heart and lung transplants together. So it was like really, really fun and exciting. And then it was like, okay, I got in my second year. And that's just what was supposed to happen, right? But we spend all this time getting these degrees that we feel, you know, we've spent a lot of money on. And then you kind of feel trapped that you're right. You have to do this full-time position. It has to be this kind of like cookie cutter system. And it may not be. I mean, maybe it's that you do a shift here and you do a shift there, and then you do something else on the side. And that kind of gives you the balance that you're looking for. And maybe the 40 hours works for people. You just have to, I feel like now people are getting more creative about what works for them because what we were doing wasn't working. And so now this is kind of, where do you go if you're feeling stuck? Who can you talk to if you're feeling stuck, and what are the next steps?
Right. I love that. And it essentially allowed to open your eyes to this career path, which, how did you get started? Like, I know you said you started doing a lot of kind of cold reach outs and kind of asking attorneys what they're looking for, but what kind of resources, educational resources? I know you coach, so we're going to make sure we drop your information in the show notes, but
Yeah.
if someone was interested in doing this, if they're like, okay, I want to be a CRNA, but I love the idea of keeping this in my mind down the road when I need that more flexibility in my life, where would they start?
Yeah, there's tons of programs online. There's several institutions, schools, nursing schools around the country who will offer just kind of like short online classes. So really, you have to go to Google. You have to kind of weigh out all the pros and cons. Some places are more expensive than others. A lot of people don't have a ton of money lying around to say, okay, I have $15,000 to do this because we've just paid for nursing school or
Mhm.
whatever else. There is a governing body over legal nurse consultants called the AALNC, and they offer a lot of courses and kind of like free resources. But honestly, in this day and age, YouTube's going to be your best friend. You're going to go out there and you're going to find a program that works for you and crush it.
Yeah, awesome. And I know LinkedIn is an important way that you've connected with a lot of people.
It is. I had so I had never been on LinkedIn before. Like as a nurse, it's like, oh, I don't need to network because
Right.
every nursing job I've ever applied for, I've gotten. Like I
Mhm.
became a nurse and I just said, okay, I'm gonna work in the cardiac ICU. So I go interview and then I get the job. But I know nursing is different now. And so there is a lot of networking that's
Mhm.
going on there, but there still aren't a lot of CRNAs. So that's
Mhm.
kind of like when I saw your name, I'm like, I'm going to reach out to her. And so you kind of just get this different kind of, business tough skin where you're like, I'm going to reach out and network, which is not really something we have to do in the hospital. But in the business world, you do, and you have to put yourself out there. And so it's kind of been a fun journey of saying, like, I'm going to talk to this person. And all the CRNAs I've connected with on LinkedIn are awesome. And they're all kind of doing, still working clinically, but then also doing some stuff on the side, real estate or mentoring and whatever else. And it's been a lot of fun to meet all the different people.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you mentioned you weren't on LinkedIn. I was not either. And even after I started CRNA School Prep Academy, I really wasn't. I mean, I had a LinkedIn page, but I don't really ever log in there. But now with Nurses Teach Nurses, like you said, in the business world, it's vital. Like you have to make
Right.
those connections. It's really how you survive. So it's like, okay, Jenny, roll up your sleeves, do this. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of an introvert. I'm shy. And I think it's really intimidating for me to like put myself out there. And obviously I do it. I do it with Certified School Prep Academy. But for me, this feels like family. Like these are my people. These are my
Right.
nurses. These are people who want to become CRNAs. Like, it doesn't feel
Right.
scary to me when I know who I'm talking to.
Right.
Um, but with like LinkedIn, I'm like, ooh, I don't know who's out there. Like, it can be a big, scary world, right? But there is so much value there. So I actually think nurses and CRNAs are doing themselves a big disservice by not being on it, because, like you said, you never know who you're going to run into, and it could maybe if being an expert witness is not your thing, you could run into a CRNA who does like Botox injections or runs a med spa or real
Right.
estate, or I mean, there's so many different unique little niches within the anesthesia space that I think it's a missed opportunity if you're not on there networking. So
Absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
that. And I think we'll kind of wrap this up with, I guess, what would you say are like, I know we already talked a lot about the pros, which is the flexibility, but what are some of the cons? And if you had to do it all over again, would you do any steps differently the second time around?
As far as branching off into like the legal world,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, would I do anything a second time around?
Or like different, like would you take a different step first? Like would you have gotten there faster or smoother had you done something different?
Right. I feel like marketing is the hardest thing. Um, and so I probably, initially, and when I say I've sent out thousands of emails just trying to find, any attorney who's working with anesthesia related cases, I've sent thousands. And so initially I was writing every single one and finding emails on LinkedIn and going to Google and using different platforms. But now I have a really streamlined way of how I can do my follow ups and do my emails. And so it's just trial and error. You have to learn all of that. I mean, I built a website. I am not the person to be building a website, but honestly, it's like what I tell my kids, like it's hard. You can do hard things. Same thing as graduating CRNA school. We talk about how hard it is, but you survive it and you can do hard things. And so it's just been different. I think I probably would have taught myself how to market a little better at first, and maybe that would have made things a little easier, but you also learn from your mistakes. Everything I do in the operating room, I do the same thing over and over. It's for a reason, right? Because I've never been sad when my patient was 180 and then I spun the head back around to extubate, but I have been sad when I didn't spin around and then the patient laryngospasmed and I didn't have any of my stuff, so you do things based off of your experiences. It's the same thing in business as it is in the hospital. You just have to learn.
Yeah, I love that. So essentially you should see this as a business. I mean, you're creating a business, which I think, it's funny. Like in my time in business, what I have found to be really challenging is, yes, you have a specific thing that you're doing, like mentorship or being an expert witness, which you equally have to pay attention to and understand and learn. But then in order for you to actually have success in doing that, you have to then also understand business and what it means to market yourself and get exposure and follow through. And like you said, it takes, I think I've heard statistics like it takes someone 7 times to see something before they actually take action on it. So you're like, they don't care. They're not listening. They're ignoring me. They're ghosting me. But you're like, I'm going to keep following up. I have to reach out to them 7 times before they say yay or nay. Right. And ultimately not being afraid of rejection is a big part of it too. And learning from the rejection.
That part's been brutal. I mean, there have been a lot of really nice people that I've talked to, and they're, same as in healthcare, you can have a really, really nice cardiothoracic surgeon and you can maybe have one who's not having a great day. And so there are some people who will be like, hey, get lost. Hey, you're annoying. Hey. And honestly, it's like same thing, like when you're getting deposed and the opposite side is critiquing your report. It's not personal. Nothing's personal. The way somebody else responds to you is totally on them. And so it did take a while to kind of get that tough skin of, okay, well, I'm just gonna, okay, I'm gonna move on now. Because we're not really used to that. So that was the rejection initially was hard, but you're absolutely right. It's that 7 times. I've had people 3 and 4 times of calling and emailing that finally reach back out and say like, okay, hey, we actually had this case come in last night. Like, this is what I need. And you can start, these lawsuits take years. And that's why being on the anesthesia side of it, documenting, making sure that you are doing the things that we know are so important. Supinating the hand with foam underneath and making sure there's not too much compression and, talking about the teeth pre and post induction and turning the gas on. I don't know if you saw in the news, there was a case of awareness. I want to say within the last week or so, but it was pretty brutal. And of course, like traumatic for anybody involved to have to live through that. So anyways, it gives you a different perspective working as an anesthesia provider of knowing what to look for. And it's definitely shaped how I chart things and how I do things differently.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I could probably pick your brain on all those types of cases. Cause I think the big part for me is we actually had a program director who did legal expert witness, and he'd always share his stories. And if anything has stuck with me, cause I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's one thing to kind of like strike some fear into your heart, but it equally makes you be more vigilant. Cause you're like, I know some of the bad outcomes that can happen. So and documentation is huge. When I was a student, there was a new CRNA who got involved in a case with, it was a rapid infuser where they infused air through a rapid infuser, but documentation, like the big takeaway was you have to document and every little thing. And so, I love that you kind of shared that. And I'm not trying to scare any of you guys. You're like, oh no, I never want to do this. Like it exists even in nursing. This is not just CRNA. It's really in anything medical related. You have to really follow your tail and make sure you're documenting. But I love that you do this, and I'm grateful that you are in that world and providing your experience with others. I think is wonderful. We'll have your information in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to Kristen, if you guys are interested in becoming an expert witness or even to review legal cases, she'd be a wealth of information for you to reach out to. She can help you kind of, and you didn't mention before that a lot of the programs out there, because we're really specific. We're anesthesia, and we tend to have I guess we tend to have a knowledge level that's a little bit different than just like nurse witness, right? So I
Correct.
think that it would be really key when you want to take this on as an anesthesia provider that you kind of learn from another anesthesia provider on the nuances about like how to write up a report as a CRNA on a legal case. And I think that would be a unique template based on our knowledge. I think, again, you would be a great resource for those of you listening who are interested. So thank you so much.
There are also a lot of anesthesiologists who do it, and I didn't even realize that. And so LinkedIn's been another great way to just connect with everybody and kind of see, oh, this is what his resume looks like. Oh, this is what his report is. And so that's been really nice because I feel like at the hospitals I've worked at, no one's ever talked about it. But people are doing it all the time. So maybe it's just kind of this little kept secret that nobody is discussing.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kristen. It's been an honor and to have you on the show. I'm sure we could probably do some repeat shows in the future. For those of you guys, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you as always. We'll see you next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Hey, future CRNA, as always, I appreciate you and your loyalty. Thank you so very much for tuning in this week. I'd love to hear from you, so screenshot this episode and share it to your IG stories with your biggest takeaway. Don't forget to tag me at CRNA School Prep Academy so I can personally thank you. Be sure to head over to CRNAschoolprepacademy.com to check out our blog and gather free resources to help you along your CRNA journey. Stay strong, and I'll see you next week.